in Mago Reddit. Today's story is...
My sister disappeared 18 years ago, leaving her children with me. But when I received a gift of $250,000, she reappeared with a terrifying demand that changed everything. When I look back at those early years of looking after my sister's children, I wonder how I got into that situation. It wasn't something I planned. It just happened. I never thought of myself as someone who wanted to have children. My life was quiet, simple, and enough for me. But when life put those children in my arms, I didn't have the heart to turn them away. It all started with a call from social services. They told me they had tried to contact my sister without success. They explained that they had found her children, aged 8 and 10, living alone in a neglected apartment. No other family member wanted to take care of them, and they were asking me, practically a stranger to them, to intervene. At the time, I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into. I was single, in my mid-20s, with no real experience with children, but the fear in the social workers' voices was enough to make the decision. I vividly remember the first time I met my niece Emily and my nephew Aaron. They were sitting together on the sofa, hugging each other, as if trying to protect themselves from the outside world. Their eyes were empty, their faces pale. It was hard to believe that such young children could carry so much sadness in their eyes. But there it was. I don't know what I expected to find, but it certainly wasn't that. At first, they barely spoke. Emily seemed lost in her own world, and Aaron was furious. He hated everything. Every time I tried to hug him, he pushed me away. He had fits of rage, he would scream at the slightest thing, and he would hit the walls. He was difficult to reach. He was hurt, and he had every right to be. Their mother of both, had abandoned them, leaving them alone with nothing but their names. I couldn't imagine all they had suffered. And although I didn't know how to repair that damage, I kept trying with perseverance. I took them to therapy and tried to make their lives as normal as possible. School became a real challenge. Emily couldn't concentrate, and Aaron's behavior got worse every day. I tried to get him involved in activities and sports, in anything that might help him channel his anger, but nothing seemed to work. I learned that the road to emotional recovery would be neither easy nor quick. There were nights when I would lie awake for hours, waiting for them to fall asleep, wondering how I would manage to get through another day. There were moments when I wanted to break down and scream in frustration, but I held those emotions in. I couldn't fall apart. They needed me to be strong and steady. I spent years working to provide stability for them, even though my own life was completely disorganized. The financial burden was overwhelming. I had to work 3 different jobs to support them full-time, which meant that I lived from one paycheck to the next with no room for savings. My social life ceased to exist. I had no time for it. Every ounce of my energy was devoted to making sure they were okay. I didn't have much left for myself, but I didn't care. If they needed me, I would be there without hesitation. What hurt the most was that their mother, my sister, had completely disappeared. She had vanished from their lives without a trace, without a single phone call. At first, I tried to get in touch with her, but it was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. Nobody knew where she was. Nobody seemed to really care. It took months for social services to track her down. When they finally did, she was furious. She didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to face the disaster she had created. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore. I had become the mother of her children. I had to be for them. And little by little, over time, they began to trust me. Emily started to smile again. Aaron still had outbursts of anger, but these gradually diminished over time. We went through terrible times, but together we managed to survive. It wasn't easy, though. I never expected it to be. My sister's neglect was something I couldn't easily forgive. She had abandoned them, left them to fend for themselves while she went out partying and pursuing her own lifestyle. Her actions were unforgivable, but I wasn't going to let that stop me from doing the right thing for her children. I raised them with love, discipline, and structure. As the years passed, things began to change. Emily and Aaron grew up. They became teenagers. and the unpredictable and rebellious nature of their early years slowly began to fade. Emily, at 21, had become an intelligent and compassionate young woman, full of dreams and aspirations. Aaron, at 23, was still discovering himself, but he had come a long way from the angry child I first met. He was working, he had a stable job, and he was slowly healing his relationship with his past. But the decisive moment came a year ago when Emily, now 27, and Aaron, 29, approached me with a look in their eyes that I couldn't decipher. I always knew that they appreciated everything I had done for them, but this was different. There was a seriousness in their expressions that made me nervous. They sat me down and, after a long silence, Emily spoke first. She said they had been talking for months about how to thank me, about everything I had given up for them, everything I had sacrificed. And then Aaron took a check out of his jacket pocket. My eyes nearly popped out of my head when I saw the amount written: $250,000. They had set up a trust fund for me, a way of compensating me for all those years I had spent looking after them. And as if that wasn't enough, they had also bought me a house, a beautiful, cozy home in the suburbs, perfect for starting over, for having a life of my own again. I knew they were doing well professionally and that their investments had been successful, but I never expected them to do something like this for me. I was completely overwhelmed. I didn't know what to say, and the truth is that I never expected anything from them. I had always just wanted them to be happy, to be healthy, to be safe. The love and gratitude in their eyes made me feel that I had done something right, something that was worth more than any amount of money or property, but for me it meant much more than a simple material gesture. That night I sat in my old, worn-out apartment, holding the keys to the new house in my hand, with tears rolling down my cheeks. I had never felt so valued in my entire life. For the first time, I felt that all the years of sacrifice had had a real purpose. But, as expected, it wasn't long before my sister reappeared. She had always been selfish, but this time I couldn't believe her nerve. She came barging into my life once again, demanding that I give her the house and the money she thought she deserved. Her own children, her own flesh and blood, had given me all that, and she couldn't bear it. I had never seen my sister behave like that before. She stood there, her rigid posture betraying her frustration, and said that she had given up everything for those children, as if somehow that entitled her to return to their lives and claim ownership of everything they had given me. She claimed that she had sacrificed her own dreams, her own happiness, and now they were giving me a house, money, and everything they should have given to her. She scornfully asked me if I really thought I should just sit there and accept it. I shook my head, trying to calm the intense frustration growing inside me. I had no energy for her delusions. I told her that they had given me those things because they wanted to. They were grateful for my efforts over the years, and I hadn't asked for any of this. And yet, she, who wasn't even there for them when they needed her most, accused me of stealing what rightfully belonged to the children. Her eyes flashed with anger as she retorted that I didn't know what it had been like for her. How much she had had to endure the late nights, the sleepless mornings, the constant struggles, and what had she gotten in return? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now they gave everything to me, and she was supposed to just accept it? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. I told her as firmly as I could that she hadn't been there for them. She had abandoned them, and they had no choice but to rely on me. But even so, they could still consider her if she changed. I explained that this wasn't about who owed whom what. It was about their gratitude for everything I had done when she decided to leave. But that only intensified her anger. She asked me with disdain if I thought I was some kind of saint. If she thought I was better than her, she reminded me that she was their biological mother. She had had to bear the burden of bringing them into the world. She had had to make the difficult decisions, and yet there I was, receiving everything while she was left with nothing. Her voice trembled with anger as she said she couldn't just take everything away from her. She couldn't just turn up and take what she believed was rightfully hers. I slowly shook my head. The weight of her words settled heavily in my chest. But I didn't back down. I told her that she had given up her right when she decided to leave. I had been there day after day, raising them, loving them, while she was chasing whatever it was she considered more important. The supposed gifts she thought I had taken from her were a symbol of her children's appreciation, of their love for me. I wasn't going to allow her to taint that gesture with her selfish claims. But her face was transformed by frustration. She came closer, practically hissing that this was not about gratitude. It was about ownership. She was their mother, and they owed her loyalty. She deserved that house and that money, not me. Her voice trembled with desperation as she demanded that I give it all back. She even threatened to take legal action against me if I didn't comply. She swore she wouldn't let me get away with it. She didn't intimidate me at all. I simply looked at her and told her she could try. I wasn't going to give up what had been given to me with such affection. I would give it back to the kids if necessary, but not to her. What they gave me, they did because they wanted to, and I wasn't going to give in to their pressure. I didn't care how many threats she threw in my direction. She didn't deserve a single thing she was claiming. Now she was visibly trembling, and I could see the venom in her gaze. She asked me if I really thought I was better than her. If I thought I could just take everything from her without consequences. She shouted at me. She demanded that I understand how much I had sacrificed for those children. How could I be so cruel, so cold? How could I just take everything from her? Her words left me stunned, and for a moment I almost allowed myself to feel guilt. Almost. But I quickly reminded myself of the truth. She had abandoned them. She was not there when they needed her most. It was she who chose a different path. It was not I who left them to fend for themselves while she did who knows what with her life. I asked her if it was drugs talking for her, because she hadn't been around for the last 18 years or so. I told her, as firmly as I could, that she couldn't come back into their lives and take what she hadn't earned. I had earned my place in their lives. I had earned their love. I had earned the things they had given me, and I was wrong to think they owed me anything. Not after everything I had done. Or rather, not done. His face flushed with anger. I could see the tremor in his hands. I knew he was on the verge of exploding, but I wasn't afraid. I wasn't going to let him break me with his threats. He shouted, his voice saturated with rage, demanding that I give him what he considered rightfully his. But I said no to him again and again. No, I wasn't going to give it back. No, I wasn't going to give in to his demands. And no, he wasn't going to get his way this time. And then he finally lost all control. She said I would regret it, that she would make sure of it. She promised me she would see how far she was willing to go to make me pay. But I didn't let her words get to me. It all came down to control. It was about her wanting to feel like she still had some kind of power over them, over me. And I wasn't going to let her have it, not after everything we'd been through. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the walls shook. I knew that this wasn't over, that this confrontation was just the beginning. Update 1. A week had passed since my sister burst into my life demanding what she felt was owed to her. My nerves were still on edge from that confrontation, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, unsure of what she might do next. I didn't know her well anymore. I hadn't for years, but I had a nagging feeling that this was just the beginning of something worse. I went about my usual routine, trying to keep things normal for the kids. There was something about the way she spoke during our argument, the venom in her voice, that had set off all the alarm bells in my head. I tried to ignore that feeling, telling myself that maybe I was exaggerating things, that maybe it was just my nerves playing tricks on me. As the days went by, I did my best to carry on as normal. I kept my distance from my sister, avoiding answering her phone calls and text messages. I thought I had seen the worst of her, but then I received a call that made my blood run cold. It was a voice I hadn't heard in many years, Emily and Aaron's father. I didn't expect him to be involved in this matter, but there he was, calling me out of the blue. He didn't beat around the bush. He told me straight out that he knew his children were better off with me. He admitted that he hadn't been a good father. He acknowledged that he had failed them, that he had been a disappointment to them. He said that he did not plan to get involved in their lives now, that he had been useless as a father, and that he would not try to make up for it at this stage. But then he said something that made my heart stop for a moment. He confessed to me that he felt he owed me something, that he was indebted to me for everything he had done for his children, for giving them the love and care that he should have provided for them all these years. However, he warned me to be careful. He said that my sister had lost her mind, that she was capable of going to any extreme to get what she felt she deserved, even if it had no legal basis. He warned me that if I thought things were bad now, I hadn't seen anything yet. I swallowed with difficulty as I processed her words. I didn't know what to make of this information, but one thing was clear. My sister was more dangerous than I had ever imagined. That night, I was making dinner, trying to keep my mind occupied. I had felt increasingly paranoid in the days since our confrontation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As I set the table, I noticed the glass of water next to me, one I hadn't touched yet. It looked strange, slightly cloudy. I frowned, unsure of what I was seeing. It could have been an effect of the lighting, I told myself, or maybe just a problem with the glass. But then I perceived something else, just a subtle change, a faint, almost metallic scent that I couldn't clearly identify. My heart began to race as I examined the glass again, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling growing in my stomach. I looked at the food on the counter. Everything seemed normal, but there was something about the water that made my skin crawl. I didn't drink it. Instead, I picked up the glass and examined it carefully, running my fingers around the rim. It wasn't just the appearance of the water that felt strange. The glass itself felt different to the touch. My stomach contracted, and I suddenly remembered that my sister had appeared at home earlier that day. She was still at the old apartment. She had come, of course, demanding to speak to me, something I had been avoiding. She had barely said hello before diving straight into her claims about what she deserved and what the children owed her. I had thrown her out of my house after a tense, emotionally charged confrontation, telling her that I was no longer going to listen to her delusions. But it didn't take me long to realize that maybe, just maybe, her visit had had another, more sinister purpose. Otherwise, why would she have left so easily? My fingers trembled as I put the glass down on the table. The idea that she was capable of something so horrible, of poisoning me, made my chest tighten with anguish. I ran to the kitchen, opened the cupboard, and found the small box I kept for emergencies. It was a test kit I had been given years ago, after a particularly difficult period in my life when I didn't know who to trust. It was a long shot, but I couldn't ignore my instinct any longer. I had to know the truth. I carefully dipped the swab from the kit into the water, holding my breath as I watched its reaction. The color change was immediate, obvious, and undeniable. My heart sank. It was poison, without a doubt. I couldn't believe it. The woman I once called my sister. The woman who had abandoned her own children and left me with the responsibility of raising them had tried to kill me for a house and money. I stood there, paralyzed, staring at the glass in disbelief. I never thought she could sink so low. I don't even clearly remember the moments that followed, just a blur of shock and fear. I immediately secured the entire kitchen, making sure there was no way the children could be affected in any way. They were coming for dinner that night. I called the police, my voice trembling but determined, as I explained what had happened. When the officers arrived, I felt an overwhelming sense of fear. How had things gotten this far? How had my sister become so ruthless? The police took the evidence while I stood there in a daze. My mind was bombarded with countless simultaneous thoughts. What exactly had she been planning? Why hadn't I seen the signs before? Had she been plotting this from the moment she found out that the boys had given me that money? Had she been waiting for the right moment to strike and get what she felt she deserved? The investigation was quick and conclusive, but it was the result that left me completely devastated. The authorities informed me that they had questioned my sister. She remained calm, showing no remorse whatsoever. When the officers told her that she was being accused of attempted poisoning, she actually laughed cheekily. She insisted that she had done nothing wrong, that I was the one who was wrong for stealing what rightfully belonged to her. In her deranged mind, the boys owed her everything they had given me. She couldn't even conceive of the idea that I wasn't entitled to any of it. It was difficult to process the whole situation. The police advised me to remain vigilant, and I knew I couldn't risk any more. Update 2. After the shock of the poisoning attempt, things only got worse. The incident with my sister felt like a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. I couldn't stop reliving the images in my head over and over again. But my sister didn't give up. In fact, if anything, she clung even more to her convictions and decided to escalate the situation to an even more worrying level. I was not prepared for the next phase of this twisted game. It began with a letter that arrived in my mailbox. I opened it, only to find legal terminology that made my stomach turn. My sister was suing me, claiming that the house and the money the boys had given me were wrongfully obtained, even though they had disowned her years ago for abandoning them. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The lawsuit was based on an absurd premise, one that defied all sense of justice and logic. She claimed that her biological connection to Emily and Aaron gave her an unquestionable right to their gifts. Although she hadn't looked after them for years, she argued that the money and the house belonged to her by default, and that I had manipulated the children into giving me such valuable gifts, as if they were pawns in some cruel game that I had orchestrated. I shook my head in disbelief as I read the legal documents, but the hardest part wasn't the legal battle itself. I honestly thought I would win the case. I had always tried to protect my children, and had tried to make up for her failures as a mother, even if she didn't deserve it. And now, here she was, dragging me to court out of pure greed. The children were understandably furious. Emily and Aaron both rallied to my support, refusing outright to allow their mother's lawsuit to proceed. They wanted to make it absolutely clear to the courts and to their own mother that they fully supported her decision to give me the house and the money. My lawyer advised me to let him handle the situation. As the court case progressed, the contrast between my sister and me could not have been more evident. My sister, always carrying her sense of entitlement like a shield, barely acknowledged the years of neglect to which she had subjected her children. She refused to admit that she had been anything less than the perfect mother, even though her past actions spoke for themselves. I, on the other hand, had always put the children first. I had sacrificed my own life, my own happiness, to give them a stable home. I had never asked for anything in return for my dedication. Every time my sister opened her mouth in court, she made her own situation worse with every statement she made. At one point, she actually tried to argue that the children's decision to give me the house and the money had been a mistake, claiming that they were too young to understand the implications of their actions. She presented herself as the mother who had suffered greatly and been deprived of her rightful inheritance, and accused me of manipulating the children. Even the judge shook his head at the absurdity of her arguments. The children, Emily and Aaron, were forceful in their testimonies. Emily spoke passionately about how I had been there for them when no one else was. Aaron, usually more reserved, was equally explicit in recalling the sacrifices he had made for them and the countless times he had supported them when their mother was conspicuous by her absence. It was clear to everyone that I had earned their love, respect, and trust through years of dedication, while my sister had simply lost her mind to greed. The court ruled in my favor. The judge recognized my sister's cruelty and entitled attitude and ordered her to pay me $50,000 in damages for the harassment and attempted poisoning, as well as sentencing her to a year in jail after she confessed. The court also passed harsh judgment on her abandonment of her children, sentencing her to a further short prison term for child neglect. I remember sitting there in the courtroom, feeling the weight of the ruling like a thick fog over me. When the verdict was announced, my sister's face contorted with uncontainable rage. She was furious beyond description. She tried to argue with the judge, her shrill voice full of disbelief, but there was nothing she could say that would change the outcome. She was ordered to pay the compensation and serve the prison sentence. That part was what shocked her the most. It was a consequence she had never imagined for herself. She had believed she could manipulate everyone around her, that her sense of entitlement would protect her from any responsibility, but now she had nowhere to hide from justice. Update 3. In the days following the verdict, the incessant phone calls began. They weren't from the boys. They were relieved that the case was finally over. No, the calls were from one person, my sister in prison. She claimed that she had learned her lesson, that she was deeply sorry for everything, and that she would do anything to remedy the situation. But I knew it was better not to believe her words. I tried to ignore her, to concentrate on the future, on my own life, and on the new house that Emily and Aaron had so lovingly given me. I no longer had room in my life for someone like her and her manipulations. But then one day, I was sitting in the kitchen going through some old documents when the phone rang once again. This time, it wasn't the usual barrage of accusations and claims. Instead, I heard a small, broken voice, almost unrecognizable. It was my sister, but she sounded like someone I didn't know at all. Her voice trembled as she told me how sorry she was for everything that had happened, how she had made a terrible mistake. She said she had never intended for things to go that far and that she regretted all the pain she had caused. But as much as I wanted to believe her, I simply couldn't trust her after everything that had happened. In the midst of her emotional rambling, she asked me something that took me completely by surprise. "Will you help me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the line. "I don't know what to do anymore. Please, I can't do this alone." The words hung in the air like a weight I couldn't escape. This was not the person who had shared childhood memories with me. This was a woman who had sacrificed everything for money, for selfishness, for a sick need to control and manipulate. And yet, there was something in her voice that reminded me of the little girl she had once tried so lovingly to protect. The sister she had trusted in those distant days. But that was in the past, wasn't it? I took a deep breath and forced myself to speak, trying to keep the emotion out of my voice. I told her I couldn't help her. My words were firm, but my heart felt heavy. I asked her, how could she even think of poisoning herself? I reminded her that the boys were coming that day. What would have happened if they had drunk that contaminated glass of water? I heard her begin to cry, soft, choppy sobs piercing the silence of the phone line. She said she was deeply sorry, that she had done terrible and unforgivable things. She acknowledged that she had been selfish and that she did not understand what had happened to her. She asked me to let her talk to the children, to give me their phone numbers. She assured me that she would do anything to remedy the situation. I couldn't listen to any more. I said no. I warned her to stay as far away from my children as possible, even after she was released. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing heavily, as if she were struggling to keep her composure. Finally, she spoke again, but this time, there was no desperation in her voice. All she said was, "Okay, and goodbye." The line went silent for a moment, and I didn't know what to add. Part of me felt the weight of the years of pain we had both experienced, but another part felt relief, a sense of freedom from the burden she had placed on my shoulders for so long. I could no longer carry her pain and her choices. I hung up the phone, it was over, and I felt at peace with that decision. But somewhere deep inside, I knew that she would never be able to escape the consequences of her own actions. And that was the only form of justice I needed to move on with my life.